Lord forgive me for this trap shit. Sergeant Smack make it backflip. Telly Hank it with the action. With the Vato speaking Spanish. Frank Matthews how I vanish. Poof. Came back like I'm King Tut. Gold BBS is on a beamer. When Fat Cat was 10 queens up. Ball off the profit, not the re-up. Fly like Puerto Rican Jesus. Uptown like I'm Baby May. Just caught a touchdown from the Bay.
Yo, we back. It's your boy Popalot. Mobb ties. We on our way to Connecticut with it. Bridgeport. The notorious P.T. Barnum housing projects. Now, if any of y'all familiar with any of the places that I named, y'all get in the motherfucking comment box. Y'all got a story to be told. Now, this story is going to take place circa 1985, right around to 2001-ish. And the guy that we're going to be covering today is going to be a guy by the name of Frankie The Terminator Estrada. Now, before we get into the details of the case, a little bit about the Terminator. It said that he began dealing marijuana at age 12 and cocaine at age 16. His father, who was living in Brooklyn, New York at the time, was his supplier until he ripped the Terminator off for $17,000 when he was 18 years old. Estrada was supposed to get a kilo of cocaine for that $17,000. Instead, his father chose to run off on him. Now, it said that he moved with his mother to the squalid P.T. Barnum housing projects when he was 17 years old. He organized his own drug crew by 1987, where he began selling powder cocaine outside of buildings number 10 and number 11. His organization at that time consisted of his brother, Edward French Fry Estrada, and a handful of other guys that we're going to talk about. Now, authorities say Estrada, whose name was the Terminator, was the leader of the gang from the start, and he laminated that at his trial, saying, "I had the drug connections, and I was good at making money." Authorities say Estrada stockpiled assault weapons and handguns, and he brought through an addict that had a weapons permit, so he would pretty much pay that addict in drugs, and the addict would in turn bring back weapons. Estrada said guns were an integral part of the drug trade to intimidate rivals and to protect against stick-up boys that were looking to rob drug dealers, saying that stick-up boys and drug dealers don't mix. And pretty much he's saying they're out to steal the money and he's out to make the money. And also saying that drug dealers are easy targets because they're never going to report those robberies to the police. Now, it said that Estrada got his first taste of betrayal early in PT, and that's going to be the housing projects, PT Barnum, when a former lieutenant of his, a guy by the name of Junior, robbed his sister's apartment, shot one of his associates, a guy by the name of Joe Diaz, in the head, and then threw Estrada's mother and his sister out a second floor window, injuring the both of them. Now, it was kind of murky because I guess I don't know if the gentleman was masked, but it was said that Estrada instantly suspected Junior because they had a falling out and he was the only person that knew where the money was. And that's going to say what led to the Terminator being a Terminator, because he ended up ordering Junior to be killed behind that. Now, with Junior's death, it's saying there was a lot of drug dealers that were vying for business in the sprawling P.T. Barnum housing complex in the late 1980s, and the violence was never ending. Now, from Estrada, his words himself, saying, "We weren't really making any money out there. We was just shooting back and forth. We was at war. You can't be involved in war and make money at the same time," which is a principle that a lot of people, yeah, well, if you don't believe it, you're stupid, because, man, if you got bloodshed, you ain't going to be making money. Now, it's said that even a chance civil conversation in P.T. Barnum could have led to violent consequences. Now, after the Terminator casually mentioned to another gentleman named Ty Holloman, who was also a rival drug dealer in the P.T. Barnum housing projects, that he was going to get a particular Mercedes Benz that he bought from a local dealership. Now, Holloman ended up buying the Benz for himself. Estrada ended up having his car torched, and Holloman ended up responding by burning Jeeps that was owned by Estrada and another associate of his. Now, it was said that when Estrada's crew members started selling for Holloman, well, one of them defected and went to sell for Holloman on that side. And his brother, French Fry, ended up shooting the guy that ended up switching sides. Now, the tensions between the Holloman and Estrada organization escalated in April of 1990 on a night when Holloman was throwing himself a party at a place called the Marquee Lounge. Estrada drove up with two members of his crew to the lounge and positioned himself on the railroad tracks above the club's exit. And guess who was the target? Exactly, Ty Holloman. Now, when a group of Holloman's friends left the club, Louis Hitman Cologne and Joseph Dinky Diaz opened fire, killing the Holloman associate by the name of Jeremy Jacobs. Now, the Terminator was eventually charged with that murder. And his lawyer at the time, a guy by the name of James Ruan, who first represented Estrada when he was 17 years old and using the identification of his younger brother, who was a juvenile, just to escape the harsher sentences that an adult would get per juvenile. And Estrada would go on to say that his lawyer knew about the fraudulent identity but continued to represent him. So yeah, towards the end, the nigga would started throwing everybody under the bus. Now, the charges for that shooting were based on statements by eyewitness who saw him loading assault rifles into a van before Jacob's killing and unloading them right afterwards. So he testified that Ruin told him that if the witness, a guy by the name of Charles Glasstop Maury, was to change his testimony in that case, it would be a lot better for the case. And his attorney at the time, his attorney's attorney, James Pickerston, denied that Mr. Wayne had any kind of misconduct in connection with the representation of the Terminator. So it's towards the end, the Terminator would testify against one of his co-defendants. I seen where he gave damning testimony against his lawyer. So this shit is just an epidemic of the boss testifying against the organization. So he would end up getting convicted in that case for not the murder charge, but the lesser crime of conspiracy to commit murder, which would end up being thrown out on an appeal 5 years down the line. So authorities pretty much alleged that he had 5 years to pretty much just get his plan together as far as what he was going to do. And in that case, the jury could reasonably have found the following facts: that in the early morning of April 23rd, 1990, Jeremy Jacobs, Christopher Adams, Michael Adams, Christopher Smith, and Tyrone Holloman and others were leaving the Marquise Lounge on the northwest corner of Main Street and Railroad Avenue in Bridgeport. And as they came out the lounge, they were shot from the direction of the elevated railroad tracks that ran next to the lounge parking lot. Jacobs was hit and subsequently died from his wounds. Another patron, Julie Hanks, suffered a foot wound, and the shooting lasts from about 20 seconds to 3 minutes from what the police allege. Now, a few years before his arrest for the Jacob murder, Estrada said he had been ripped off by one of his underlings, a guy by the name of Ray Merlitt, who disappeared with a package of cocaine. When Estrada and his crew caught up with Merlitt, they ended up stripping him, handcuffing him to a boiler in an abandoned building and fucking him up real bad. They left him naked, handcuffed, and fucked up to that boiler. The assault would have serious ramifications for the Terminator later on down the line when he was eventually sentenced to state prison. What the Terminator didn't know was Merlett's brother was a guy by the name of Nelson Merlitt, and he was the founder and leader of the Latin Kings gang, which was entrenched in the state prisons and in the ghettos of Bridgeport at that time. Now, at the Bridgeport Correctional Center on North Avenue, They said that Estrada held sway. He was paying correction officers to smuggle in drugs for him to sell. He would pretty much deal the motion by telling his girlfriend that the guards would be coming by his house to come pick up some heroin. So he still was in jail, kind of pretty much doing his thing. But he had this looming beef with the Latin Kings. So, based on Estrada's testimony, he was saying the Latin Kings were in charge of the whole jail system as far as the gangs was concerned. He also testified he wasn't able to do anything. He got stabbed. So after a stint of protective custody, Estrada said that he had to sit down and he negotiated a settlement with the Latin Kings, who had their own drug trafficking operation going on in the streets. Now, from what he said they didn't want no problems with him on the streets. In jail, they had everything controlled. On the streets, it would have been a whole different story. So what would happen with that situation is he would end up joining the gang and start to put his crew together that he was going to use to take over the PT Barnum projects as soon as he got released. And two integral figures in that crew would be a guy by the name of Billy the Kid Gomez and another guy by the name of Eddie Tan Marcato. Now, the Terminator and Billy the Kid would go on to testify against Eddie Tan Marcato. And how the Terminator knew him is, well, they met at the Brooklyn, Connecticut Correctional Institution while the Terminator was serving his arrest for the Jacobs killing. But they also crossed paths in the 1980s in the P.T. Barnum housing project, so they were very familiar with each other. Now, Estrada would go on to say where Billy the Kid Gomez was wild, Marcato was smooth. Estrada and Marcato became like brothers, along with another guy by the name of Jose Luago. They worked together to smuggle heroin into the Brooklyn facility by way of like contact visits in which inmates were allowed to hold hands or briefly kiss with the visitors, and they would pretty much be passing heroin balloons, 20 packets of heroin. And he said, the Terminator said the drug business was booming on the streets, but it was definitely booming in jail, but because you can get up to $50 for a bag of heroin behind bars. Now, authorities would allege with Gomez and Marcato on board, Estrada had the core of his new operation. The game plan was to no longer coexist with rival drug dealers and PT. And he was not gonna waste no time getting in crossfire type shit. It was just time to blow up the PT Barnum housing projects and take the projects over and monopolize on the drug trade there. Now, according to authorities, when Estrada got out of prison in September of 1995, he headed back to New York to reestablish his Colombian contacts. He would then go to the airport to pick up mules, which were passengers from Colombia who had swallowed 80 to 100 packets of heroin before boarding the plane. They said back in Bridgeport, he set up a small grocery store on State Street that he would use as a front to be able to cover and launder all the money that he was going to make. He said high-level Dominican dealers staked the purchase of him getting back in the game, and he pretty much never ratted them. He never ratted them dudes out, and he said that they trusted him. So you know what they say in the game: no matter what the fuck you do, man, all you need is a connect and customers, and you right back at it. So now that kind of put him back in the spotlight, and PT Barnum getting released. It was said that his organization would go on to consume pretty much the whole project. I'm sure it was pockets where other people was getting money, but he's going to be the main one, and his name would still be popping up with murders. Now, his co-defendant that he testified against, Tan, he's charged with the killing of a woman by the name of Ayda Escalarea. Now, federal prosecutors and Tan's defense team agree that Frankie Estrada had a motive to want her dead, but they don't agree on what that motive was. Now, Tan testified that Estrada told him that Ayda, who had been a witness to him killing a man that was arguing with Estrada's sister Frances. Now, Estrada maintains that Escalarea was an eyewitness to an upcoming murder trial involving another client of Ruin, and he threatened to mess up Ruin's case. So that's another kind of aspect of where the Terminator would try to throw his lawyer under the bus, saying that that murder was committed in part to help his lawyer. Now, Tan would testify that he told Estrada that he wasn't going to kill Ayda Escalarea because it was Estrada's own personal business and not what he was in the projects to do. Now, Gomez and Estrada both say that Tan was involved in the killing, which took place around midnight on January the 29th of 1996. Gomez would testify that Estrada told him to kill Escalarea, and it was initiated, or he was agitated pretty much that the job was not done several days later after he asked him. So Gomez said that Estrada told his sister to bring Escalarea to PT Barnum, and they took turns shooting her in an abandoned building using a .22 caliber handgun that was equipped with a silencer. Now, that murder remained unsolved for years until at least a year after the November 2000 indictment of Estrada and his crew. So they said in the intervening years after that killing, Estrada's crew grew despite the drug busts and the betrayals that he would go through. Now, his lieutenant, Gomez, would end up telling the police about one of Estrada's stash houses in 97 and running off. And he pretty much told the police that information in exchange for bond. When Estrada found out, it said that he put a $200,000 bounty on his head. According to one of his close associates, Lugo, he said that he just wanted Gomez dead. Authorities would go on to say the secret to his success seems simple. He had the best heroin. He paid his lieutenants more. According to Eddie Longhorn, who was a lieutenant that testified that Estrada would take 60% of the proceeds and his lieutenants would get 40%, and that was generous by street standards. And they said some of his lieutenants pocketed more than $5,000 a day. Estrada maintained drug operations in New Haven and Meriden as well. He brought a second store, and in 1998, he brought a nightclub that was called Palacio Blanco on Main Street in Bridgeport. He paid $1.6 million for the club. Most of it was under the table. He didn't want, and it said that he didn't want to show that type of money. Estrada said Ruin referred him to another attorney to set up a series of limited liability corporations to mask Estrada's role in the nightclub, which he renovated and renamed the nightclub Club Innovations. And he would also use that club to launder the money from his drug proceeds. Now, David Dillon, the FBI agent in charge of the Estrada investigation, testified that the investigation began in 1999 after a massive investigation into the Latin Kings was wrapped up. Estrada had come to the attention of federal investigators in prison when they learned that he was having problems with the Latin Kings. So, if that don't go to show you just how this shit go, he ended up being investigated in 1999 for some beef that he was having in 1995 that would lead them to knock off his large-scale drug operation after they investigated the Latin Kings. But he was the star that the government was looking for because he was only sentenced to 27 and a half years, which is modest for the amount of killing and the amount of drugs on this indictment. Y'all let me know, is that the new shit? Is that the new trend? Bosses snitching on the organizations? I don't get it, man. We're going to be back with some more real trill spill shit, man. It's your boy Popalot. Y'all make sure y'all follow me on Instagram, on Twitter, POP_A_LOT. And y'all stay tuned. Y'all hit that bell for the notifications. We're going to be back with some more real trill spill, man. It's the Mobb. Mobb. Ties.